Broadview Heights, North Carlton, Strongsville, Berea, which is where I live, and Olmsted Falls. And I want to first recognize, as Skip already did, but my colleague, Representative Sarah Fowler Arthur. Thanks for coming tonight. Are we in your district here? Officially? Okay, very good. Well, thanks for hosting. It's always good form to let a colleague know when you're shopping for the district, so I can do that directly. Now you know. I want to also recognize Brandon Davis, who's on the ballot as a write-in candidate this year. So if you live in the Chester country, be sure to write in that name. We go back about 20 years together, back to when I carried the banner for the Republican Party running against Dennis, who finished this last week passed in 2006 as the Republican nominee that year. That's not why I'm here. I always like to provide introductions and hellos, though. We introduced this bill really to try and get our arms around metropolitan planning organizations here in Ohio. And John Kalis, who taking pictures right now, but who really introduced me and educated me on this issue as a member-elect last fall, is largely responsible for the legislation that is now introduced. And I should say as well that I'm a repeat offender in the legislature, or a fake freshman, as I call myself. I served previously from 2011 to 2016, so not new at the job, but out for 8 years and now back in. And in some ways, as a 50-year-old this time rather than a 34-year-old the first time I started this, hopefully know a little bit more about how to do the job effectively. And curiously enough, in term 4 at this point, makes me one of the more senior members, even as a brand new member coming in the door. That allows me to have a real platform with the partnership with the Speaker of the House, with whom I served last time around, and the experience of doing the job and now serving as the Vice Chairman of the House Finance Committee, to be able to lean in on some thornier issues, some conservative issues that I really want to tackle over, if the voters provide the time for me, the next 7+ years to be able to resolve for the state, or at least move in a positive direction. One of those things is metropolitan planning organizations, and Skip really teed up very well the work that we're trying to do to reform this process. And one of the first things that people ask me when I talk about this is, isn't that a federal issue? And the correct answer to that question in a technical sense is yes. It's under a federal law that goes back to 1962, the Kennedy administration, and really got legs under the Johnson administration in terms of a lot of the regulations that are tied to it. But as with Medicaid, for example, another issue that I'm working pretty extensively on right now to try to resolve a pretty significant amount of what we think is fraud and corruption in the system, it's a federal-state partnership. And so if we can provide correction at the state level with our statute to sort of how several different MPOs are organized and executing their job in whichever region of the state they happen to represent, then I think we can move the ball forward on this. We're doing that now in House Bill 445, so if you want to check that out, it's a really pretty simple bill, though. People were asking as I was working the draft on this thing, what does it do, how long is it, all this sort of thing. It's, I think, all 5 pages long, and it really has 4 different components to it to try to put not just NOACA, but MORPC, which is the Central Ohio Metropolitan Planning Organization, and perhaps some others in a better position for doing what the core mission is. As Skip indicated, that's really infrastructure. It's roads and bridges. It's not climate action plans. It's not using taxpayer money to paint a mural on the side of their headquarters building in downtown Cleveland. I use that often, but just as a flippant example of the way that they sort of waste their money and they get outside, color outside the lines. So the 4 parts of the bill, I just want to focus on quickly, and then happy to answer any questions that we have, are these. The first is one that Skip mentioned already, and that's the imbalance that's on the NOACA board in particular. And I don't know if this is the case all over the state, but it certainly is here. We have 5 counties that are part of this: Geauga, Lake, Cuyahoga, Lorain, and Medina. And of the 46 members on the board, 26 are from Cuyahoga County. There's no way that if everyone from the 4 collar counties, the outlying counties, decided that they didn't like a policy that the board was promulgating, that even if they all voted together, they could stop it. And so you really have what I consider to be an anti-Republican and anti-democratic process in place where, yes, elected officials serve on this board, But it's way beyond what it was when originally constructed, where it's county commissioners who provide the money, county engineers who are really the planners to bring the professional expertise to the table. That was the original way it was constructed. Now you've got all kinds of other folks who are on this thing. And so you have a division between Geauga and everybody else. That's a great chart. And then you also have a division between the city of Cleveland and suburban mayors, even within the county. My entire district is inside Geauga County. So people have come to me and said, well, aren't you acting against the interests of your own county in advocating for and authoring a bill like this? The answer is no, because even in my suburban area, we're outnumbered as well, because there the vote is 12 for Cleveland and 11 for all the suburban mayors. So even if all the suburbs said we want to do it one way, as opposed to the city of Cleveland and the various other regional organizations like the Sewer District, Port Authority, and some others, again, we're always outvoted. And where this really, where the rubber really meets the road is in terms of economic development and infrastructure being essentially held hostage by the folks who are downtown who insist that Cleveland, they won't say it this way, but effectively have a veto over everything. And so if, say, Intel, a rather sizable concern, wants to place a semiconductor chip plant here in the state of Ohio, and the county of Lorraine happens to have a pretty substantial amount of people who focus on that area of job creation, and a local community college that has 20 years worth of expertise in training up young people to work in that field, and you've got a mega site that is open and has a substantial amount of land where you can build such a facility, and it's near Lake Erie, and you have to use lots of fresh water in order to keep the place cool for all the energy that's needed for this, what's known as a large load customer. Wouldn't one think, if one were reasonable, that that would be an outstanding place to site an Intel facility? And yet, where is it? Right in Newark County. It's down in Lincoln County, down in Newark. And so it's ended up in central Ohio. And that's where a lot of these types of companies have ended up going because of poor decisions that have stood in the way of economic development by entities like NOACA. They were approached to have an interchange go into place at the appropriate location in Lorraine County and basically killed the deal. And it's not said that way, it's not put that way, and people will push back against this. They question my facts and other things on this particular example. But the reality is, it's one example of where this organization has stood in the way of growth. I'll give you another one in the county itself. So the Valor Acres expansion that's on the old VA in Brecksville, just to the east of my legislative district. That, along with Sherwin-Williams being put downtown, major redevelopment of the area, both from an economic development standpoint for a major corporation that's been here in Cleveland itself since the 19th century, and a mixed-use retail area, residential, all this sort of thing. They wanted to expand one of their interchanges just off I-77. And again, they were told, not going to happen unless there's an income tax kickback that goes back to the cities of Cleveland and Warrensville Heights. And so I've labeled that essentially as legalized extortion. They got the deal, right? They'll get their interchange, they'll get their money, all this sort of thing, but only in exchange for effectively a veto from downtown Cleveland saying, thou shalt do it this way, or no money. And so these are just a couple of economic development examples from the region that have been used in order to get their way on a certain policy, get tax dollars to flow a certain direction in order to get the result. So this bill, item number 1, that's the long way around the barn to say what item number 1 is, will prohibit any one county in a metropolitan planning organization in the state of Ohio from having a majority on one of these boards. I happened to be at dinner on a completely separate topic the other night with a fellow who is the board chairman for the Southwestern Ohio MPO, which is an 8-county region that includes counties in Ohio, Northern Kentucky, and Indiana. And a lot of folks are now popping up from different MPOs around the state to say, hey, that's not a good idea, or why are you doing that? Ours runs well. And it sounds like theirs actually does run very well. It's collaborative, there's a process where they work together. It doesn't sound like any one county has primacy in terms of what the distribution of votes is on the board. And it's 3 states for one thing, which actually may be more helpful in some ways to get things done. Not that we can do that in a place like Cleveland where we're up against the lake, but that one works well. So we want to get a policy in place where Geauga County can have a majority on the board. Secondly, if a county wants to move from one metropolitan planning organization to another, and this last happened within NOACA, very close to the early history. So I always mix these up, John. It's Summit and Portage. Yeah, Summit and Portage were once part of NOACA as well. They left, I think, in the early 1970s, and so it's been the 5 counties ever since. So I don't know how that process worked back then, but the process we want to put in place today, and I'll use a pretty specific example here, is in Medina County. If the commuting pattern is no longer from, say, Brunswick or the city of Medina up to Cleveland on a regular basis, and it's instead heading over to Akron into Summit County, if more than 25% of the commuting pattern, based on census figures, indicates that that's the way that it's flowing, then the county should be able to, through its Board of Commissioners and the other county's Board of Commissioners, petition to the governor to be moved from one MPO to another. So we just want to streamline the process to say, if you all in Geauga have had enough, and it only takes 50,000 residents under the federal statute to form an MPO. If you had enough of this, you should be able, based on data, it's an evidence-based, data-driven model that we're putting in place. It's not just, I'm going to do it this way. Then you should be able to make a petition to do that through your county board of commissioners and through the governor. That's the second piece of the bill. The third Skip alluded to in terms of what's happening at the federal level. We have a great president of the United States once again. He's signing executive orders and moving things back in a positive direction for us on things such as DEI and a bunch of other policies. NOACA and other metropolitan planning organizations, rather than running afoul of federal and state statute or regulation, need to comply with what these laws and regulations are. And not by playing funny business, by changing the name from one thing to another, changing it from a committee to a subcommittee, sticking it on the side burner, whatever the case may be. They need to comply with federal law. Right? Under the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution, that's how our federal form of government works in this republic. And just because people have forgotten that, doesn't make it any less true. So that's the third thing. Fourth, we have an employee who works for us as the executive director of NOACA who is hauling down about 4 times the average Ohioan salary, and she thinks it's okay to still have a job as an adjunct faculty member at Northwestern University in Chicago, which is where she came from before she came to serve as the executive director of this MPO. She was in a similar role out there. We should have the person who's focused on doing this job, which is an important job from an economic development perspective, infrastructure perspective, focused on doing her job solely, not commuting back and forth, not doing something else. And so simply that's the last part of the bill. We'll see where it goes. It's assigned now to the local government committee, and it's not yet had its sponsor hearing. My joint sponsor on this bill, incidentally, is the chairman of the Finance Committee, Brian Stewart, a former county commissioner from Pickaway County, just outside of Columbus. And so he's seen this both as a county commissioner in a collar sort of county outside of Franklin, very much like Geauga is outside of Geauga. And I asked him, would you be willing to come on this thing, because I want to make this not just about Northeast Ohio, but actually have someone who understands and has experienced what this looks like in other parts of the state. And so he was kind enough to join me on this. So you've got the chair and the vice chair of the Finance and Appropriations Committee that are running this, so not badly positioned members of the caucus, hopefully, to begin advancing this process. But of course, it's always up to the 65 members who are in our caucus, and then of course the entire House to get things done. And then we don't have a companion bill at this point in the Senate. We'll see if anybody has interest in doing that. If not, I think Brian and I are happy to go and run this over there once it gets through the House portion of the legislative process. So I think I'll stop there. Hopefully that's helpful. Answer any questions that you have.
Let me read the first comment. If you check the federal code, the process for leaving an MPO is pretty straightforward. It's in the federal code. It says if 2 counties want to do that, then they get together, they create an agreement, they get the largest city involved in the county, they get the governor to approve it, and then they can do it. The problem we've got is NOACA stands as a barrier to changing that. And if the counties, just from a cultural standpoint, we don't, your community doesn't really fit with downtown Cleveland culturally either. And so a lot of that culture really is a problem. So with that said, I'll take the question. That might help in terms of that. Go ahead.
How did that person get the job as a deputy director of Milwaukee if they're from Chicago? Do you know? Because I wouldn't mind, running for that job. I'm sorry.
We'll see whether it's available again soon. They just executed a 1-year extension on her contract, and it's regrettable that was what they chose to do in the executive committee, but that's the case. And she's been there for how long, guys? Like 12 years, 15 years?
Yeah, since 2014.
Yeah.
Great.
So 11, 12 years now. So.
Yeah, great. Any other questions?
And the individual's hired by the board. So that's the short answer to your question.
Are you concerned that with bringing in the data centers, that in order to feed the electrical needs of these data centers, that it's going to impact the residential, where they're going to suppress the electricity for the homes to feed the data centers? That's really what I'm asking.
Yeah, great question, Brian. I serve on the Energy Committee as well, and in my prior life in the House was chair of its predecessor committee, Public Utilities, so I work in the space a lot. I am concerned about it, and one of the big things that we're focused on now is to try to get additional baseload generation on the grid. Because a lot of coal has come offline now. That was the case really from about the last time I was surveying to today. New plants, two up on Lake here, have transferred ownership, and a lot of other changes have taken place within the space. I have broader concerns as well about the regional transmission organization, or RTO, part of, which is called PJM. The Philly area, those we're not tracking, and Ohio's one of 12 different states that are part of that RTO, and there are other states that are part of it that are making state-level decisions that we'll just charitably say don't align well with how conservatives would do it and are doing it here in the state of Ohio. And those include Maryland and Virginia, to some extent Pennsylvania as well. And they've really put a lot of emphasis into the renewable portfolio standard, wind and solar, and all these sorts of things that just don't reliably generate the amount of base load that we need. And so we're going to have to figure out how to get more online. I was just down in Washington County, Marietta, about a month ago, visiting some folks down there. There's an organization called Shale Crescent that is in southeastern Ohio and over to West Virginia. We have more natural gas under this part of the country, really than any other place, I think, in the world. It's essentially the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. And if we can get our arms around how to get that out of the ground, and fracking and a number of things I've been working on for really from the time that I've been around in this line of work, are much more advanced today and much easier to get the resources out of the ground and where they need to be used. That needs to be done. Small modular nuclear reactors need to be developed more effectively. Babcock and Wilcox in Medina County and some other locations around the state. A great company that's been working on some of that type of technology. So the answer is yes. We've got to get more baseload generation in place so we don't have that challenge. Because these large load customers they're a giant energy suck, and the last thing that we want is just rolling down the course on the grid. Yes, ma'am.
I want to say thank you. Thank you for doing this, because I've been hearing about this for so long that it's about time somebody does this. And how can we put the pressure on to get the state legislatures to pass this?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the compliment, first of all. And it's when we step forward to do the right thing, the right policy will come from it. So it just takes a little bit of courage by all of us, not just me. I just happen to serve the seat for a limited amount of time, borrowing from the residents, from the voters. I'll have to give it back at the end. And but all of us, if we come together and work on these kinds of things by calling, emailing, writing your legislators, get them involved. Sarah's been kind enough to hop on this bill, and wise enough, I think, to hop on this bill, along with some of her colleagues in the area here. Steve Demetri, I think, is on board as well. There are a number of others, mostly from Northeast Ohio, and I think all from our caucus. I'd like to see this as a bipartisan bill at some point. It's really a no-brainer that it should be, but you've got a lot of folks who are across the aisle who adherents of big government, and they prefer this way of doing things, which, as Skip indicated at the beginning, I also think this is really an extra constitutional construct that's been put in place, but in case you haven't noticed, the ship sort of sailed on that about 120 years ago in terms of the administrative state taking over for a representative republic. We're trying to put those things back to the extent we can. And that's, if I have a theme around my period of time back in this office, whether it's 2 years or 8 years, it's that. I'm trying to tackle in as many different ways as I can, whether it's on my Medicaid fraud investigation or this or a number of other things, the distance that has been moved, both in this state and in our country, from being a representative republic based on self-rule and ordered liberty to whatever this other thing is. We know what it is. Right? It's the creeping movement towards socialism. It's Wilsonian, it's progressivism. All these things are variants of Marxism. They're dangerous, they're anti-American, and they're not how the founders generated and founded this republic. And everything we can do to help move back in the right direction is what we need to do. One step at a time legislatively, one step at a time in regulatory sense. So that's really my mission, whether it's in this office for a couple of years or more, or in another office going along.
Sarah, would you like to say?